If mindfulness is so powerful, why do so many mindful leaders still burn out? And why do some workplaces use mindfulness like a band aid instead of fixing what's broken? Today, we are going there. Practical mindfulness for leadership, culture, and decision making, not vibes, not slogans. Welcome back to the Mindful Living podcast, listeners. I'm your host, Sana. And if you're all listening during the holidays or right before New Year, I see you. This season can feel like a highlight reel for everyone else and a pressure cooker for you. So let's make this useful. And today we are talking about mindfulness as a leadership skill. The the kind that shows up in decisions, conflict, culture, and what you tolerate, not just how calm you look on Zoom. As well as my guest, Dalida Turkovic, has over 30 years of lived and professional experience across Asia, coaching executives and building high performing teams. She founded the Beijing Mindfulness Center and the BMC Academy, and she trains leaders, educators, and coaches through ICF-accredited programs. Her lens, it is grounded and human. She doesn't treat mindfulness as a trend. She treats it like a capacity. So, Dalida, welcome to the Mindful Living, and I'm really glad to have you here with us.
Thank you, Sana, for a great introduction, and it's wonderful to be with you.
Super, super. Okay, so Dalida, it's a kind of my a huge point of concern because I think still there's a huge percentage of leaders or people who are especially in the corporate workspace who would treat mindfulness as something just like a wellness trend. So when they hear about it, they often think self-care or personal calm, that's it. But then you are saying mindfulness it becomes a leadership capacity. So what does that actually mean in behavior?
Yes, exactly. What does it mean in behavior? Because not many people really talk about it. When mindfulness, first maybe we can distinguish between secular and Buddhist mindfulness concept, right? So what I will be talking about is more secular mindfulness approach, and the way how that concept was presented to the world as if you practice mindfulness, you're going to have more focus, calm, and your life is going to be better. You will have less stress. And somehow that became a hook for people, or the reason why begin to practice mindfulness, as if it was a pill, some kind of remedy for stress. But actually, all of these side effects of mindfulness come on their own. We don't need to force it. It's not an objective. It's more like there's much more to it than just being calm and not having stress, because we can't have life without stress. Stress is part of life. And this is why I think a lot of organizations and leaders have approached to it as it's a well-being context. But actually, the key of mindfulness is self-awareness. And then the second one is the capacity for us to actually connect with each other. So it's really about the common humanity. So it's really important concept for creating a good organizational culture where people feel connected and safe, that there's ecological safety. These are very, very important elements of the practice. And then the question is, when we get into that self awareness, what are we going to do with it? And how to use self awareness not only as a concept, but to actually apply it in the behavior. And then practices are really diverse. Every person is going to have maybe a different entry point into the practice. So it's also the difficulty I think that organizations are facing at the moment is that they're seeing it as a linear process. Maybe doing 6 or 8 week program and then thinking this is it, you now know the tools. But mindfulness is not a program to finish and understand. It's a path. It's something to really apply as a daily uh, regulation practice. Something a little bit like, even though we eat every day, we still keep getting hungry. So we don't say, I'm going to eat today or for 6 weeks and then that's it. I'll understand what eating means. Right.
Yeah. Yep.
So, yeah.
No, and I think this actually it's like, the sunshine clearing the fog, that um and for the fact that, we often treat mindfulness or wellness as uh, the last resort, when, things completely when go awry, and everything is looking like, going against us. That, as you very clearly explained, like, let's do a 6 to 8 weeks of program and everything will be fine. But I think it's more of an embodied practice, that way how beautifully it has to assimilate in the day to day work we are doing, the way we are thinking, the way we are connecting, um, the way we are approaching problems or challenges. And it's never the solution to eradicate stress, because as you mentioned, and this is something that I have also understood, in the long run, that stress is necessary. It is necessary because it helps us to get out of that comfort zone, but it doesn't have to come at the cost of our own holistic self, our own identity, and of course, our loved ones as well. And another very important word that you mentioned is psychological safety. I think this is something right now we so much need. I mean, of course, physical safety is something, but psychological safety, I think that's what is going to matter the most in the coming years as well. A quick pause for you listening, listeners. If this conversation is already giving you language for what you feel inside, or if you feel it's helping you see your patterns with a little less shame, hit follow on the Mindful Living. And if someone in your life keeps saying, I am stuck, or I do not know what is wrong with me, share this episode with them after you are done. All right, back to it.
Absolutely. And because of that continuous stress, and we are living in at a time when there's a lot of uncertainty. Maybe the uncertainty follows us as humanity all the time, but because of all the changes and maybe the application of AI and changing, shifting the transformation, transforming the way how we approach to work, and maybe doing more work online. And look at us, we can just be connected in Serbia and in India, and like have a conversation. So there's a lot of convenience, but that also causes a lot of stress and newness that we still don't know how to deal with. And when it comes to performing and having the pressure of uh, reaching our goals and targets, especially in an organization, people can bring that stress as a motivator to go and do more. It's almost like we need that adrenaline kick, as you say, to step out of the comfort zone. So psychological safety means, and this is the term that many organizations have looked at for very deeply. What kind of culture do we have about making mistakes? So, first, if the culture of organization does not support learning through making mistakes, people will not feel psychologically safe. If there is a blame culture, if there's criticism, all of that is going to bring some sense of separation, and people will withdraw and become more and more silent. And that itself is going to create a lot of inner space where they're not feeling safe to express their opinion. There's lack of creativity, and all these concepts we know through many, many different concepts of leadership development, organizational development. So now one question that deeply concerns me is the role of leadership to create the space for psychological safety,
Mm.
which means that there is something about the presence of a leader who knows exactly how to show up when they are being with uh, their team, either one on one or in a group, where they can truly listen and hear what is being said. So, a lot of times we struggle with knowing what we want and what we need. So, we say things in a very complex way. And when leaders have their mindfulness practice, they become a little bit more sensitive to what is being said underneath, below the iceberg, if you know what I mean. What kind of values people have, what are they really concerned about? And then they can also reflect and through conversation help the team to express themselves with more ease. And there's also something that we've been talking about, it's vulnerability, showing
Mm.
the humanity of the leader. So when the leader can show their own humanity and be vulnerable and express that they too feel fear, uncertainty, confusion, and that is okay, then there is something that brings the sense of togetherness. And people don't feel less than, but they feel more like we belong. And despite all of these challenges, we can move forward and we can build something together.
Absolutely. And the leader one, I mean, because this is not just black and white. I mean, there is definitely nuance here. Like a lot of times here, because um, here people are involved. So many voices are involved, and sometimes it may happen that the leader themselves, they are not able to figure out what exactly should I do to make sure that my people the people in my company or my team, they are able to have that psychological safety, because it may mean different for different people. So in such cases, where exactly should the leader start with?
Within. The way out is in. So, first with their own practice. And this is why I actually like the combination between mindfulness and coaching. Because within the coaching space or mindfulness based coaching, leaders can get that one on one time when they can really look deeply on the complexity that they are facing, because it's not only about the team, it's about organizational needs, the needs of the team, and then the needs of the leader as an individual, as a human. And sometimes they can be aligned and sometimes they can be separate. And when they're separate, there can be a conflict, right? Like, so the team can be in conflict with organization, or the leader can be in the conflict with the team because they are really forcing organizational needs. And in that space of pausing and looking deeply and understanding where are the bridges, the leader has space to formulate their message and also to understand what form of action is really most applicable for a situation that they're looking at. So, one challenge for that psychological safety is that everything is moving way too fast. And in that speed, we are bound to make mistakes, or we are bound to, through the stress, also not to feel safe. And when we are not feeling safe, then we make mistakes, and then there are consequences to that. We may hurt others, I mean, what mistakes really mean, but let's say for that human to human connection. And when we have a space to pause, which is so precious, but pause in a space where another person can hold the container of where the leader can feel safe to explore what is emotionally happening within them,
Mm.
then that is something very, I call it sacred. Just in a way, how you're holding the space for me. So I know in which direction to go and what to say. As you said, it's so complex. The journey is not linear. There are so many different ways to explain it. But you are holding the space for me to expand whatever I have learned through my life, my practice, my experience. So I know how to actually really bring the concepts that might be most relevant at the moment.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. And I mean, uh, when pressure hits, I mean, I will personally also admit that at times when I've been so much under pressure, especially like being in a um not exactly a leadership position, but where I am responsible for the people who are working with me in my team. Often we resort to the default habits like control, speed, as you mentioned, avoidance, sometimes blame game, perfectionism. In your experience, what does mindfulness change inside decision making? Not the mood, but what fundamental difference does it make?
Well, I mentioned already self-awareness and what it means, as you beautifully named it. We all have these parts of the shadow aspect of our psyche, like it's parts where we feel there's imposter syndrome, there's um, like the part that is hyperachiever, or somebody who wants to perform so well, never make many any mistakes, or a pleaser, or a victim. So these are parts of our life experience, maybe something we bring through the family upbringing, and all these conditionings also within the culture, right? Like, so for example, maybe in the West there's a really high performing culture. In the East, maybe there's more of a or individualistic culture, right? Like in the West, in the East, maybe there's more of a collective culture. And so the rules are different. The rules of behavior, or what really works. And what mindfulness does is somehow just imagine that when we go, we say we go into that shadow aspect, something we want to hide, something we are not very proud of, and we are struggling with it. We resist it. We want to remove it because we see it as an obstacle.
Yeah.
But what mindfulness does, it's almost like brings the light to that. So we have capacity to gently, kindly, and with compassion look at those parts of ourselves and understand where they come from, what are they really trying to help us to do, because they have a very singular focus. And once we have the capacity to see it from that space of compassion, feel our own humanity, then they stop being the driving force of our decision making and our behavior. And something else comes up. It's in a way we can like come to a place where it's like, oh, that's what is really driving this decision. And what if I just pause and maybe expand my perspective and see it from a different angle? And when we have the capacity to do that for ourselves, our world, we somehow begin to develop the capacity to do the same when we are hearing others, because we can hear where their shadow is, where they're limited, if they're having the energy of high performer, or perfectionist or pleaser and so on, and even help them to kind of like shift their own world, and that's how it ripples on others. And eventually, when the leader has that capacity of self-awareness, and shifting their behavior through that, there's more of not knowledgeable leadership that comes up, but wise leadership. And people will begin to really learn from that behavior. Now, you also mentioned something for all those people, and there are many more professions like that where we are entrepreneurs, we are solopreneurs, we work on our own. And again, it's challenging to see ourselves. So we can know, like, oh, I have this perfectionist in me. But the most difficult part is to see our own face. We only can see it through a mirror, in a mirror, right? So in that case, like one challenge for all those solo business owners, the question is, if you don't have the team, if you don't have relational aspect apart from your clients, then who is really helping you to see your own dynamics and hold that container of feeling safe to look deeply inside and dissolve these autopilot tendencies that are really limiting us?
Hmm. Hmm. And it doesn't mean that we have to be very harsh critics of ourselves. Instead of our inner critique talking about, we have to connect with that inner self voice. Maybe these are my actual strengths, but because of my old limiting beliefs, or maybe something that I have been kind of boxing in within myself for such a long time. Maybe now this is the right time to make a pivotal shift here. Not, overnight, no quick overhaul, but gradually, one small step at a time. Maybe, breath work or journaling, or trying to understand what makes us, like, happy from within. I think there are definitely so many tools and modalities and channels out there which are really very helpful.
Absolutely. And you're also mentioning now very, very important concepts. One is the inner critic,
Mm.
Gremlin, or like in coaching, we sometimes call it the inner sergeant or drill sergeant, and it's our tendency. It's one part of our humanity. We have somehow learned in education or in a lot of cultures, there's a perception that the criticism is the only way to motivate ourselves to do better. And because of that, that inner critic is, we get it from parents as well. A lot of times when I ask my clients, where does this voice of the inner critic comes from? It actually comes from parents who really wanted to get that child to like to do more, perform better, right? And be a good human. And somehow in our childhood we learned that, wow, actually that worked. And then we accept that voice and take it through life and continue to motivate ourselves from the space of the inner critic. But everyone comes to a certain point when we realize that the inner critic can take us as far, and there is a certain point when the only direction when inner critic motivates us is the burnout.
Yeah.
And so this is also that mindfulness really shifts. It's shifting from motivation from the inner critic to a compassionate self.
Exactly.
So that compassionate self being also capital S self. Right.
Exactly. And you mentioned about compassion, and you connect with clear decision making. Now, especially leadership, some would worry that this is going to make me weak or easy to manipulate. I need to be aggressive, strong willed. Of course, I mean, not only for leaders, I personally believe the leader that, many situations, just like, we talked about that, how sometimes stress is useful. I absolutely believe that sometimes a bit of an not aggression but mental strength. That strength is it is required. But then it's again, once again, it kind of gets generalized that, compassion, vulnerability, emotional intelligence, mindfulness, these are all soft skills and they make leaders weak.
Mm.
uh, how do you define compassion in leadership so it doesn't turn into people pleasing?
And that is such an important distinction to make, because again, we talked about the shadow aspect, and that pleasing is really coming from the shadow, from that part of the psyche that is in a way manipulative. But compassion is completely opposite, and it also has two sides. So compassion has its soft, but it also has its I could call it maybe fierce side, right? So the soft side is about caring, uh, uh, being soft, being warm, kind, and if we are doing only that, then it can turn out and as if it is about pleasing, allowing everything to happen as it is, and is just bringing softness and kindness, right? But that would mean that actually boundaries are really porous, and there are no sense of what are the boundaries. So the other side of compassion, that fierce compassion, is about really action. So this soft side means standing still. It's a little bit more of a feminine, let's say, quality, right? But the other more masculine one is about providing, protecting, motivating, encouraging, action based, and it's basically saying, well, inner critic would, for example, say, you didn't do this well, and you need to do it better. Compassionate side would say, hey, I can see that you've tried so hard, I understand, and you still failed. Failing is part of life. Now, how could you approach this in a different way? So, while this, so there's nothing, there is softness there, but there's also motivation for action and learning. And it has the same intention as the inner critic has, but it has a different way of approaching it. So when we come and we manage, for example, our team, or we talk to our people and we say, look, I know that you're all scared about the uncertainty and downsizing. This is a difficult time. I also have some fears, but let us figure these things out and see how can we go through this together and figure out the way forward. It's completely different from hiding or saying no, everything is great, and and then just cutting things off. Because the question is, how do we bring compassion for managing underperformance, for downsizing, for interviewing, for laying people off because they don't fit in the organization anymore, making hard decisions. And compassion without self-compassion is not complete. So
That's a powerful statement. Very, very powerful statement, Dalida. Compassion without compassion is incomplete. Yes. And before we conclude, I mean, you have coached across Asia. You bridge East-West perspectives here. You mentioned in the beginning something about the secular and then the Buddhist way of mindfulness. I mean, mindfulness, it is often taught as universal, but then workplaces are not universal.
Mm.
How does culture change how mindfulness lands in leadership, especially with hierarchy and power distance?
Mm. Well, it perhaps it needs to start with the leadership, with the top. Often in organizations, the HR will bring mindfulness for people to learn how not to be stressed, so that leadership can give them more stressful situation and they can manage themselves better, right? And that is, the intention of mindfulness is really being very separate in that way from secular perspective and then Buddhist perspective. So what I think that the secular mindfulness is missing or is really working on at the moment is to bring that sense of belonging and creating a stronger collective. So and this can begin at the board meetings when mm, leaders can go and say, "Well, we touched a very important topic here. Let us just pause for a few breaths, and each of us notice what is arising as we are discussing about this next step." And when that space for pausing can be implemented on the very top. So, in a way, to learn to slow down, not to speed up when difficult decisions are there to be made or very important decisions. And if the leadership begins to model that, then it begins to be accepted throughout the organization. And the rest will begin to model what leaders are doing. And their practice, their secular mindfulness practice will get a completely different quality in that case. Because at the moment when we go into organizations to train teams in mindfulness, and we say,
Yeah.
well, you need to be compassionate with each other. And then they tell us, but our leaders are not compassionate.
Yeah.
They criticize us, they blame us. Then mindfulness becomes a concept that is not applicable in the working culture. And honestly, I have rejected work in the past because I would ask first that question: how is your leadership approaching to the team, and how are they motivating people? And when I hear if they're having exactly a lot of criticism and blame, I reject work because I know it's not going to work. It's going to create resistance from people to practice mindfulness. But when we can validate and empirically see how uh, that is being done from the leadership side, then it's a completely different story. Then people become attracted and then they say, wow, I want to learn that as well. Please teach me how to do it, how to be calm when the storm is happening.
Yeah. And they wouldn't, want to let, whether it's job or the company or the people, they wouldn't want to let it go. They would themselves be aligned to do anything that would, make them more and more, you know, become more and more a bigger part of, the culture, the organization, uh, even, contribute in solving challenges, and to make sure that everyone is heard and seen. So one one thing that I really kind of connected with is Dalida, that um and this is a bit different from mindfulness, but I think in the hierarchical system here, whenever it comes to corporates or organizations, I think we definitely need to kind of do a major overhaul in the HR systems, and to make sure that HR is given more and more importance, because oftentimes um human resource sometimes becomes just like messenger for the leadership, to the people, that this is the policy, it has been changed, it is getting implemented, that's it, nothing else.
Yes. Yes, it's true. It's true. It's there's not what somebody said recently. The human from human resources is missing. And like we are all trying to do the best, and that pressure again is like the pressure is too high, and it's creating maybe from HR. A team often it creates that need to stiffen themselves and create the distance and very strong boundaries, just to focus on the process and not on human element. And we are going as far as saying, well, it's so much easier to manage artificial intelligence because it's going to say to do exactly what we tell them to do. So let us just lay off humans, and especially this new generations who are insisting that our workplaces need to be empathic, compassionate, that is what is driving them. And it's true, it takes time to learn these skills. But I believe if we don't go inside and begin to feel curious and really passionate about changing ourselves or allowing ourselves to grow in this direction, the question really is what happens with humanity and how humane are our workplaces going to be? Will we say we don't work anymore? And what happens to humans when we don't work? All of these questions that I think are pending to be answered in near future.
No, 100% agreed. Great, great. Before we wrap up, so Dalida, if our listeners they would like to connect with you, and explore the work that you are doing around mindfulness and your book as well, what would be the easiest way?
But the easiest way is to connect with me through my website. Not to mention, email is a little bit long, but if you search for bmcacademy.com or Beijing Mindfulness Academy, there is, I actually bring all of these concepts of mind, body, and heart presence for leaders, educators, in training them how to merge mindfulness and coaching skills so that there is that presence and standing still, but also the action that comes from coaching. So beijingmindfulnessacademy.com, there is a contact page, and just send a note or schedule a time with me. I would love to connect with anyone who is interested in learning more about what it takes to bring mindfulness and coaching to their personal skills, but also professional.
Amazing, amazing. Listeners, as I always do it for you, I'll have all the links mentioned in the show notes so that you can easily reach out to Davira. And as we wrap up, um, I think this episode, it really brought out, I mean, it was real. It really brought out the actual essence of mindfulness, and that too translated so beautifully, simple yet so beautifully by Dalida into leadership behaviors. Not just words or jargons or language, but it's kind of a personification. So thank you so much, Dalida. This was really, really needed.
Thank you. Thank you, Sana, for helping the world become a better place through bringing mindfulness to our hearts and ears and minds.
Thank you. Thank you. And to all the listeners, happy holidays. And if New Year feels exciting, amazing, but if it feels heavy, you are not alone. Lead yourself with honesty, lead others with presence, and remember, mindfulness isn't an escape from leadership. It is the skill that makes leadership sustainable. Until next time, this is your host, Sana, and this has been the Mindful Living Podcast. Thank you.